What is up, guys? Welcome back to the show. I hope you had an amazing Thanksgiving, got some rest, and you are off to a great start for this week. Today, I'm just touching base on a few things that have happened so far. Nothing too crazy. Thank God we haven't had any more mass releases or anything like that. But just a few things that have dropped. I just kind of wanted to touch base on, check in with you guys, see how everyone's doing. Getting ready for what I think is the wrestling show of the week, which is AEW Dynamite tomorrow. And I ran across a little bit of information that I'll probably lead off here with, to be honest. Just regarding ticket sales and in regards to their show that'll be next week in Long Island, New York. And it's interesting to me because now this is kind of statistics and numbers, so if you're not really into that thing, maybe skip ahead or maybe look at the breakdown for the show if you want to skip this part. But I just found it a little bit interesting because a lot of people were just saying, first off, well, let me backtrack a little bit. AEW and WWE are it's kind of cool. They're running the same building in Long Island, New York, relatively back to back. WWE Raw just did their show this past week at the USB Arena, I believe it is, or UBS, USB, same thing, right? UBS Arena in Belmont Park, which is in Long Island, New York. And this is kind of why I was curious once I saw a little bit of info. I kind of wanted to do a little bit more digging into it myself, just because I'm like a little bit of a nerd when it comes to numbers and stuff like that. But more so too because, like I was stating earlier, a lot of people are kind of giving WWE shit for not selling out the building, and I guess for what, not my words, but for what other people have called it, embarrassing numbers. And if you look at the pictures that have floated around online from various people who were in the building, that pretty much the whole section on the camera side, the hard camera side, was completely tarped off. So now, to be fair, that first section, of course, where the camera is, the majority of that normally is always taped off because you don't want people right up on the camera, especially nowadays. Can't really trust anyone. But there were a lot of empty seats, so I will say that it was kind of surprising. But when you kind of look at the breakdown, that's where it gets interesting in my opinion. So the breakdown, and where you have to kind of start off with as well, I think that the main thing that kind of eats up the availability of tickets that can be distributed is WWE's vast stage, right? Like that massive just LED screens that they have for their entrance. Now, I haven't been to WWE in probably since, what was it, was it WrestleMania 35? I have to go back and check now, but at least, definitely, obviously, since the pandemic, I definitely have to, now I'm kind of curious, I'm going to go back and check that for sure, but definitely not since everything has changed, to say the least. So, and with this new setup and everything like that. So, I had heard, and if you look at it, right, like it's a massive screen. Like, of course, it's going to take up a good chunk, probably 25% of any arena that you go into. And depending on the size, that could mean a big difference for your tickets. So, I think that plays a big role first off, too. But the first thing that I wanted to start off with, and pointing out at least, is the estimated capacity that they had set up. And I got all of this information, to be completely upfront, from WrestleTix on Twitter. So it's at WrestleTix. Definitely give them a follow if you're kind of like me and enjoy more of the business side and just the distribution of tickets. And they also have a lot of other information too that they post on there. And just like, for instance, what I'll kind of reference to, just a breakdown of how many fans have averaged at house shows and things like that, which I thought was pretty interesting. But definitely give them a follow. I found them a few months ago, maybe 6 months ago at this point. And they also release like pre-sale codes as well. So if you're one of those people who missed out on a pre-sale code or maybe is looking for it, they normally do a really good job of dropping those too in a timely manner. So definitely give them a shout out or a follow as well. And again, that's at WrestleTix, Tix. But again, so they reported that the estimated capacity for WWE's Raw at the UBS Arena, so the Raw that aired this past Monday, their capacity, which I was surprised by, was only set up for 6,706 fans. So if you think about that, that's already cutting out a lot. Now, they didn't post the entirety of the arena itself, so I'd be curious to see how many seats in total. I guess I probably should look that up. I just kind of thought about that now. But I definitely would be interested to see how many seats the building itself holds, or if it's like 15,000, for instance. And I know that depends on the event that's going on as well, but that kind of leads in and is my main focus point here, or one of them at least, is, again, that number was 6,706. That was the estimated capacity for WWE's Monday Night Raw in that building. And they ended up selling 88% of that. They ended up settling at 5,887 being distributed. Now, I know a lot of people in the back in the day have kind of been, or kind of, I don't want to say, just like kind of picked apart that word distributed, whether that means actually tickets sold or the amount of tickets available that they literally distributed, whether that's to media, comp tickets, or anything like that. But I would be curious to know just the finances, which I'm sure we can find. But for right now, that's not really the focal point here. But so to pretty much sell almost 90% of the availability, that's a pretty good feat, and again, the pictures look pretty bad because of the scarcity of everyone spaced out in the tarped off areas, but a lot of people were shitting on it and on WWE, and again, like I've been completely transparent. Like, I grew up loving WWE, but lately, it is what it is, so I'm not just gonna be biased one way or another for either company or any company. No one sends me a check, so it is what it is. But that's not like a small fee. Obviously you probably, of course, want to sell out, or you would want more, but with the availability, I don't think it was that bad. But where it was kind of getting funny, and where it kind of caught a little bit more of my attention, was people just blasting, AEW sold almost double the amount of tickets that WWE did in the same building, yada yada. And again, let me preface by saying I love both companies. I love wrestling, period. So I want everyone to succeed. I'm not, I'm not one side or this side. Lately, obviously, AEW is way more entertaining, way more captivating. It has my attention. I've made it a point to go out of my way and spend money to go to 3 shows now, since the pandemic has kind of let us go back to a somewhat normal life. And like I said, I haven't even made it an effort, honestly, to even look if there's been any WWE shows in my area or anything like that. So I guess that kind of says a lot. But I don't hate anything. But the point here is just to kind of preface that and say, I just want to be transparent, and for a lot of people who, like I said, were just kind of like throwing that narrative out there, the facts are kind of the facts. So AEW, their show that's going to be in that same arena is going to be on December 8th. So not this week, but next week's Dynamite. And they'll be taping Rampage following that after. So, of course, that'll be the number for Rampage as well. So their estimated capacity now, again, remember, WWE's was 6,706. AEW's estimated capacity is going to be 11,641. So that right there is almost double the capacity for WWE. So that alone is obviously going to look like double the amount of fans once they get that nice pan camera shot and everything like that. So that alone is a huge difference, and it makes sense, right, if you think about it, because AEW's, while they make it, you can't really tell on screen, but once you get there, the way the tunnels and the stage and everything is set up, they use their space so well, and they really utilize every inch, it seems like. So I don't know, it's smart, right? So I don't know if that was the mindset kind of going into the stage setup and the development of that as well, but whatever, kudos to them. But that's not really the point. But the point I'm making with that is the size of the stage alone cuts down the capacity. So to get back to the nitty-gritty for AEW's ticket sales so far, and this was as of yesterday, so almost 24 hours ago. It's about 23 hours as of right now from when I pulled the info. But their estimated tickets that have been distributed is sitting at 8,658. So about 74% of the availability they've already sold out. And that leaves roughly almost 3,000. Exact number, and again, this was as of yesterday, was 2,983. And again, I'm sure once a lineup is actually set for next week and we get a better idea, there's always those last minute ticket buyers and what have you. So I'm not really concerned, and I think that was my point with this as well. I'm not concerned for WWE and I say that with like a little asterisk, which because I'm gonna touch on that in a second, but I am and I'm not. But I just thought that it was kind of interesting, the narrative that was kind of being thrown out there and everything like that. And again, like I love both companies and I love both of them, but we gotta be fair, guys. Like the facts are the facts. So again, like I'm not shitting on either company or downplaying anything. To me, it is what it is. But I just kind of wanted to throw it out there and just to kind of see what you guys think and let me know. And this is a good time. I can't believe I actually forgot to mention it on last week's episode, but I did make an official Twitter page for the show, which is at @kickashpodcast_. Had to throw the underscore in there. I didn't really want to, but the Kick-Ash podcast name itself was already taken. Shame. So again, it's at Twitter at @kickashpodcast_. So feel free to let me know what you think there, or on my personal, as always, which is at ASHMANNS. But I just thought that was pretty interesting. And that kind of leads into my last little nitpicking here of the ticket sales and everything like that. Like I said, when I was kind of just browsing through WrestleTick's page just to kind of go through their history, or actually I have 2 more points, lied to you. But when I was going through their page, again, definitely give them a follow, guys. But it was kind of interesting. They had a chart, almost like a spreadsheet rather, showing the average, pretty much the rough average of live show attendance figures for WWE since, of course, the return from the pandemic, which was back in July. And they've pretty much averaged roughly about 5,000 per house show. John Cena dropped off, I believe, I believe that was, what was that, guys? Was that August, September timeframe? So, of course, you would expect to see a little drop after that, but it wasn't that drastic, to be honest with you. So I just thought that was kind of interesting as well. Again, it's not a high number, but it's not too terrible either. And the whole point of a live show is that kind of small atmosphere and that intimate feeling, and it just, I don't know, like it's a house show and a live show for a reason. It's a completely different vibe. The wrestlers are much more laid back, as there's not the pressure of being on live TV and all that. So I definitely recommend if you have one in your area, and especially around the holidays, they do a lot of like holiday live tours. I would definitely recommend a live house show for WWE, if anything. But yeah, I just thought that was kind of an interesting statistic there too that I kind of came across. But really quick before I move on here from WrestleTix and going through all of the great work that they did there, but Game Changer Wrestling, guys, GCW, they sold out the Hammerstein Ballroom in New York, and I just fucking love that. It was just so badass. And of course we all heard that announcement whenever it was made, because it was a big deal. And they had actually, there was a report out there that they had actually did some restructuring to allow more seats to be held, right, in a higher capacity than prior wrestling shows there. So I can't remember exactly where I read that from, to give them proper credit, but I know it's out there somewhere. Regardless, props to them. So fucking happy for them. I wish I could go and be there, and just that vibe is just gonna be out of this world. And I can't wait to see it. That honestly might be a show that I'll look to see what kind of streaming they do and see if I can purchase and just to kind of just watch along. If you can't be there, that's one of those shows that you kind of just have this feeling right now it's going to be a big deal. So shout out to them and everything that they've been doing, and Matt Cardona, Zack Ryder, right, just killing the game out there and just completely revamping himself, which is so badass to see, right? Like, especially with how shitty this year has been for a lot of them, and he's just had a complete 180 on his career, which is so dope to see. So of course, like, kudos to him and a lot of all the other guys that have been out there, but he's just one of them who obviously just stands out. So shout out to all those guys over there. And man, if you're going to the show, let me know. Take pictures, videos, all that good stuff. But if nothing else, just enjoy the time too and enjoy that atmosphere. Because I know, looking back on some of the shows that have been there in the past, and for instance, like that ECW One Night Stand 2005 vibe, right? And that show was just out of this world, just a completely different world. So if it's anything like that, which I'm sure it will be pretty similar, it's going to be another night to remember. So kudos to all you guys and gals out there doing all that shit on the independent scenes and keeping the wrestling world thriving. And I just personally can't wait to see how that show plays out. But moving on from all of that goodness, there was some sad news coming out of the AEW world from Big Swole. She released a tweet earlier today, or later this evening, rather. I'm just gonna pull it up and kind of read it here so I don't misspeak or put any words out there that I shouldn't. So she released, it looks like she typed something maybe on her phone and took a screenshot, which is smart because the Twitter still fucking sucks with the character limits and no edit button still after all this time, but that's a whole other rant. But back to the serious topic here. She released a tweet saying, over the past couple of months, my life has taken on the mantra grow, learn, change. Dealing with shadow work took strength I didn't know I had. I thank God for my loving family because they got me through some of the roughest months of my life. But I realized the real test is application, so I took my leap, and after speaking with TK, which is Tony Khan, and AEW higher officials, we've decided not to renew my contract with All Elite Wrestling. This was a hard decision, but a needed one. I am grateful for their understanding and that we could mutually come to this agreement. I've enjoyed my time with AEW and wish them all the best. I appreciate their love and welcoming me into the family. Today is my last day, and as bittersweet as it is, I am proud to say that I've lived my dreams while making a difference. That is Swole mentality, and put a bicep. That is. And Big Swole has dealt with and currently I'm sure still does, and it's sad, deals with a lot of health issues. I don't want to misquote here, but I'm pretty sure, I believe it was Crohn's disease that she had mentioned a while back on Twitter that she deals with on a daily basis. So that, that in and of itself is just, again, it's one of those things where just because you can't physically see something on someone doesn't mean that they aren't going through something internally. So we all have to just be decent and nice human beings, right? So I think right then and there, that just kind of showed me just what kind of person she was for, saying, just kind of being open, right? Like, she didn't have to share what she deals with and what she struggles with and what she goes through with the public, So just the fact that she did that was just so cool and admiring, And again, I don't want to misquote that, but I'm almost 100% sure that's what she said. But it was a while ago. But regardless, she is Swole, right? Like, that mentality, that Swole mentality, that is, she obviously embodies that, So whatever she's dealing with right now, we obviously just wish her nothing but the best. And it's sad that we won't be able to see her on TV, but hopefully, whatever brought her to come to this decision, everything goes well, you just wish her nothing but the best. But it sucks, like, you wish we could have seen more from her, but whatever's going on with her personally and, whatever the situation is, you just wish the best, and I think it shows a lot too, the statement that she released and the words that she used, and it looks like an amicable party, and you obviously don't see that a lot, regardless of the nature of the business. So I just hope for the best for her, and whatever she's going with, she just continues to battle through it. And I hope this isn't a goodbye completely from wrestling, because she was so talented, and she's a breath of fresh air out there, like, she's a different spice, she's different, she's something that is needed in the wrestling world. And I just loved her embodiment, right? And like, just what she could do. So I wish we kind of got more from her, but again, your health is of most importance, and especially nowadays. We've all learned that. So just sending love out to her, but definitely send her some love as well. She's, of course, on Twitter at Swole World, so definitely give her a follow and send her some love if you haven't yet. But staying in the little Twitterverse there was, I didn't see the full article, but there was word released that Karrion, or Killer Kross, depending on how you know him, was offered a leading role in an action film, as reported by Fightful Select. That will start in 2022. So my first thought was, awesome, maybe that's why he's growing out his hair, right? Like, I don't know if you guys have seen recent pics of him, but he is growing out his hair. He looks completely different, like, than the Killer or Karrion Kross that I at least have been used to. So I'm wondering if that plays into that action role or anything like that, but kudos to him, man. Like, he looks that part. Like, he looks like he can be, like, of course I don't know anything about the nature of the film or anything, just that it's an action film, which obviously makes sense, but you could totally see him as like a badass villain, right? Just this badass, like silent, just this maybe like a hire for or hit for hire type guy, or just someone out there. I just you can see him with like maybe some like kind of like a Men in Black type vibe, like a suit with the black shades and everything. I don't know. Or do you guys see him as a good guy first of all, like in the movie? Do you see like visually, like in physically, can you picture him as a good guy or a bad guy? I think that kind of is you kind of have to narrow that down first, and then you can maybe kind of like fantasize what kind of role you can see him in. But until we get maybe a little bit more news, it's kind of fun to speculate. But awesome for him, and obviously that I'm sure we probably won't see him in the wrestling world for a while. But that's kind of cool too, right? Like not every wrestler has to be a wrestler, you know. And I love that wrestlers are getting acting opportunities, and they're not just shunned from the business and taken as a joke or anything like that, which back in the day was, you know, like a lot of wrestlers, like they wouldn't even look twice at a resume or anything like that. And of course, like we have people think like The Rock, like, you know, it goes without saying. And then, of course, like your John Cena's and Steve Austin had his movie out there, you know, say what you want about The Miz, but The Miz has been a positive presence in the Hollywood world as well. Maybe not in the movie world per se, but Hollywood in general, right? Like that's a whole universe in and of itself. And he is the WWE. Like you look at him and you see WWE superstar. Like he is the banner, right? So guys like him, I think in whether directly or not, and of course Batista. But for the record, I think Batista is probably my favorite wrestler turn actor. I just loved him in Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't know what it was, but I huge fucking fan. To be honest, I haven't even seen a lot of Rock movies, which is kind of wild. But yeah, anyway, but yeah, it's just really cool to see that and to see him branch out. And Scarlett had mentioned she may be starting an OnlyFans in the beginning part of the year. So if you're into that, follow her. You know, I don't really know what it's gonna entail, but I mean, you know, it is what it is, and hey, good for her. And it's like I said, it's cool to see them like just flourishing without wrestling and just being able to branch off and taking a negative and turning it into a complete positive. So kudos to them, and it sucks we won't be able to see the whole theatrics of them as whether it be a power couple or just a duo or anything like that in wrestling anywhere for right now, but. I don't know, maybe in a way it is for the best too, since we have so many released talents just waiting to be signed and hired and just show up different places. It's kind of cool to branch out, do your own thing, so maybe if you come back in a year or a year and a half from now, whatever it is, you know, maybe the landscape is obviously going to be different, much different by then. But though, you know, you won't be just one of 80, sad as that is to say, but you won't be one of 80, you know, or however many that's out there that, you know, it'll feel like a bigger deal in a sense. So shout out to them. And I hope that, like I said, I hope it's a sign for more wrestlers to get more acting jobs and just more entertainment roles going forward too, because I think that's very, very underappreciated when it comes to what the wrestlers do on TV. It's so underappreciated and everything they have to do live, right? So just shout out to them, and it's exciting to see. One more thing related to the Twitter world, which was kind of interesting, and part of me doesn't know if this is a quote work, right? Or whatever, but I don't know. I'm just kind of one of those people, like I said, I just kind of like to take things for what they are and just kind of go with the flow and just day by day and see how it plays out. But Nia Jaxx has surfaced on Twitter again, and she did change her handle to her birth name, which is what sparked this kind of, I don't want to say downward spiral, but just this spiral of little tidbits of info, if you want to call it. But it looks like from yesterday, I believe. Yeah, so from yesterday, I guess people were questioning if her new Twitter handle was like a new ring name. I forgive me, I don't want to mispronounce the last name, but she switched it to Lena Fanine. Again, I hope I didn't butcher that, but she said, LOL, laughing emoji. Newsflash, Lena is my real name. It's not another, quote, ring name. So there's that. It's just my name, all caps. The name given to me at birth. Calm the fuck down, trolls. In all fairness, quote, opponent crippler, unquote, would be a solid front runner if I ever decide to wrestle again, laughing emoji, hand praise, but it's highly unlikely. So, I love the opponent crippler, like, it just tickles me, bro. It just fucking tickles me because, again, I've never been a Nia Jax hater. Like, she's not the best in the world out there in the ring, but, like, she could be one of those who you can go back and say she was brought up too soon and never, I'm not even going to get into all that because, yes, she did have a solid amount of time in the main roster. And, how long does it take to pretty much, like, get solid and well-rounded in the ring? But I'm not the person to answer that. I haven't trained. I've been in the ring once. Once. I've taken maybe a handful of, I don't even want to say bumps because they weren't really. It was just, like, it was, at a reputable school, but it was like one of those day things to kind of give you a feel for it. So I have no room to talk, so I'm not going to sit here and be one of those people like, oh, she does this, and this wrong. If it's something obvious, being like, yeah, no shit. Like with the punch to Becky's face, no shit. Becky got punched in the fucking face and ended up being the best moment of her career. So shit happens, you know what I mean? But like my point is I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh, she sucks, you know what I mean? I enjoyed her. I enjoyed her for what she was, and I still think they dropped the ball releasing her. If anything, send her back down to NXT if you have whatever issues or whatever you think the problem is, or if you think she needs more fine-tuning in the ring, then send her to NXT. That's literally the point of the Performance Center. So, again, that's not really the point here, but I think my point with all that was I love Nia Jax. Like, she's just, I don't know, like, I just always got a kick out of her and all the I don't want to say the hate, but, because that's obviously not funny, but just the reaction and the response that she would generate. But again, that was her initial tweet, and then of course she got responses after that, and then one of them, where'd it go? Yeah, one of them was just, it looked like from a fan who just sent some random gif or whatever, and Lena said, "LOL, don't worry, I'll be chatting," in parentheses, spilling gossip on Renee Paquette's, or with Renee Paquette, eventually, and some heart emojis or face emojis or whatever. But I was gonna say on Renee Paquette's podcast, but Renee Paquette is of course the former Renee Young. Part of me was like, okay, is all of this leading towards a return to wrestling? Because part of me doesn't believe that she's going to be gone forever, or part of me just doesn't want her to be gone forever, but I could totally see her being a model or an actress herself and totally going in that route. Like, I think she could, I can just envision her being a model and just on a runway, so I think she can definitely go that route. So maybe she does take time off from wrestling, but I hope this isn't a farewell. Again, I know that I'm totally in the minority with that, so send me your hate feedbacks or whatever, but regardless, how you feel about her, I know and you're going to be listening to that podcast whenever it drops or reading a transcript somewhere, so you can't even front and say you're not. I know I am. But yeah, then she followed that up with, because Renee had quote tweeted that and said the mics are hot, baby. Of course. And then Nia, followed up saying, girl, I'm sorry, that was actually another response to both of them. And then Lena had said, girl, it's going to be strictly gossip and hot tea I have on everyone. A devil face and fire emoji. Mwahaha. All that shit. So, yeah, so it looks like she's generating some buzz, and, whatever, good for her, it is what it is. A lot of people leave and talk shit, so whether she's gonna talk shit, or she's just doing all this, and it's, she's not really gonna be saying, like, negative stuff, but, I don't know, like, I'm not, again, me personally, I'm not really one of those that hopes they release, quote, tea, or whatever. I'm just fascinated with behind-the-scenes business itself, like, I would just love to hear, like, what her day-to-day life was, like, a schedule. And, of course, like, all the other shit is fascinating, gives us shit to talk about, too, right? With gossip, of course, everyone enjoys that. But for me, like, I just enjoyed, like, the business and hearing about that. Like, to me, like, the perfect exit interview that I've heard was Jon Moxley's, because it was just his pure, honest, just feedback and just his experience and what he went through. So regardless, I'm stoked to hear how this is going to play out, and even though you say you hate Nia Jax, right, you're going to you're gonna listen. But the last thing that I wanted to kind of touch on here that was just dropped today, and it's only about a 13, maybe 15-minute video clip on YouTube, so not long at all. But it was with Kevin Hart and The Undertaker. Two names I never, if you would have asked me 2 years ago, if I would have ever used Kevin Hart and The Undertaker in the same sentence, let alone doing an interview together in ice tubs, I would have just looked at you like it's like what has happened with the world. And that's probably a good question. But that it's, and again, like, side note, and this probably plays into me taking all of this way too seriously and just being one of those fans, but it's still weird to me that Undertaker is doing interviews, right? And seeing him as a normal human being. Like, obviously, I'm not dumb, right? There's a character and the human being, and I figured out the wrestling world years and years ago. But it's still weird, right? Like, I just never thought Undertaker would be that guy doing interviews in bathtubs with ice water with Kevin Hart, like, just doing all this, like, human shit. Like, he's the dead man. He's the Undertaker. Like, he lives in the graveyard. He buries people. He walks around with an urn. Like, his eyes always roll in the back of his head. Like, that's the Undertaker, right? Like, not this real dude. So, I guess it's still real to me, damn it, right? Like that dude said, but I don't know. I don't hate it, but it's still kind of jarring in a way. Maybe that's too strong of a word, but it's still kind of weird, and I don't know how to feel about it. I'm still trying to get used to it. But regardless, it's pretty cool, like I said. And this was, honestly, it wasn't anything too breaking news worthy or anything like that. But I think that probably the main reason I wanted to bring it up on here was he actually listed his personal Mount Rushmore of WWE, which we actually got a straight answer, which we never normally do, right? Like, a lot of your main celebrities will say, oh, well, you have your Hogans and your obvious ones, and just kind of give, like, the stereotypical answers. But, and I'm going to say the first two definitely he just named right off the bat. And part of me wonders if, like, this is, like, a particular order for him. But, and you definitely have to go back and check it out just to see his, like, actual response to it and his mannerisms and things like that, to just kind of just visually see it and get a feel for it. But he right off the bat said his first two, which I'll get into in a second. And then his last one, I fucking loved, because this dude is probably it's hard to say my all-time favorite, because for me, growing up, Jeff Hardy was the embodiment of an ideal wrestler to me. How different he was, his look, first of all, and just how different he was. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen it. There was I forget the exact name of the VHS tape that they had released on them, and then later obviously became a DVD later on. But it was like a behind the scenes looking like a growing up of like them, right? And just showing like them in Cameron, North Carolina. And it showed Jeff in his house, and his house was just filled. Like, they went into his kitchen. I remember like it was yesterday. They went into his kitchen, and his walls were just covered with just plants and just aluminum everywhere. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, why does this guy have aluminum everywhere? Is he like and I don't want to say crazy, but those people who like make like metal hats and shit because they're getting messages from outer space. And hey, I'm not knocking you, like I personally haven't received a message myself, but just because I haven't received it doesn't mean that shit ain't real and that shit ain't out there. So I'm not knocking you. I'm just saying, I haven't received it myself, but then again, I haven't made a hat, so maybe that's what I'm missing, but whatever. The point here is the plants in his fingernail polish, and I don't know why that visual of him being in his kitchen and the aluminum foil, which I later learned were aluminummies, which were just these sculptures that he made out of aluminum foil. Fucking fascinating to me. Like, the second I saw that, I was captivated. And the glow-in-the-dark paint, I don't know how soon after that, because I was still young, but the second I got to a store, I bought so much glow-in-the-dark paint in aluminum foil. Like, my grandma was probably like, what is this girl's problem? Like, she probably thought I was one of those people, like I was probably talking to someone. Like, I was receiving signals, right? So God bless her. But yeah, like after that, like this isn't about Jeff Hardy, and I'll get over this, but I ended up painting my face and made the Luminomies and all that shit. So that's why, like, it's hard for me to say that Jeff isn't my all-time favorite because of the impact he had on me as a fan growing up, and still to this day, in some respects. But Undertaker's last response, that he took a second to pause, which is why I want you guys to actually see this for yourself. But he took a second to pause before he said this answer, and I loved it because his lineup is not this like the cookie cutter answer. And again, which is why it's weird. Undertaker's out there doing interviews, but it's cool to see who he is and hear his stories and hear, God, like, you kind of wish that he would do a podcast of all the people, right? Like, as contradictory as that sounds, as much of that makes me a hypocrite in a lot of ways, but like, I don't know, it's just kind of one of those things where like you don't want it, but you kind of like it, maybe like a car crash, like you don't want to see it, but you kind of have to look type of thing. But anyway, and again, like the Mount Rushmore was the main thing that really stood out to me. The bulk of the interview and the whole, I guess, skit itself. Undertaker was in the tub the entire time. Like, dude was in there for probably at least 10 minutes. So, one of the most important parts, the entrance and the beginning of the whole clip itself, Undertaker was under the water. Kevin Hart is walking in his robe and all that shit, doing Kevin Hart things, and Undertaker rises from underneath the water. Dude is in his tub underneath ice water. Like, what? What? And then he just, like, Kevin Hart walks around, you know, they say, you know, exchange greetings. And Undertaker just, like, there's, like, a few pieces of ice on his shoulder. He just shakes off, does, like, a little, like, a burr thing, and then just remains to sit there. Meanwhile, Kevin is sitting, like, on top of his feet are in the water. Like, he didn't get in for a good, maybe 3-4 minutes into it until Taker finally caught him out and was like, pretty much like, yo, what are you doing, bro? Like, get in the tub. Why am I the only one in the tub? And then Kevin kind of got in. Didn't immerse his whole body like Undertaker did, but he got in. They just kind of went over a brief synopsis of his life and his career, how he started off being a basketball player, didn't want to go to Lithuania and be the last player on the bench to be called, so he transitioned into wrestling training, and that kind of got him into that the life, essentially, and into this world. And one of the things that had stood out to him, he said that he obviously would never forget, was a gentleman had told him that no one would ever pay money to see him wrestle, and he would never put pretty much any asses in any seats. So that was obviously a motivator for him, and looking back on it, it's so crazy to just hear comments like that. But it was a pretty, you know, basic interview. But the main event of the interview itself, like I said, was the reveal of his Mount Rushmore. And again, he might have had already mentioned it somewhere, and it's pretty much a generic question at this point, but it was the first time I heard it, so I thought it was pretty cool. Like I said, the first two he rambled off pretty much almost immediately. First two he mentioned were Andre the Giant and Stone Cold Steve Austin, which Andre is a cool choice. You know, it's not your stereotypical response. It's more common, but not as common, right, as your Steve Austins out there. So that one was pretty cool. And of course, thinking back on it and the history, you know, everything, it kind of makes sense. But it was just cool that was the first one that he said, and him and Stone Cold just pretty much rolled right off the tongue for him. The next one was The Rock, which he pretty much took no time answering as well, which, again, agree with him, but I probably would have expected maybe someone a little from like a different era or like an older era. So was very pleased with that answer as well. But my favorite answer that he gave, and again, this is the one that he kind of took a second to answer, was Shawn Michaels. When I tell you, I smiled and I actually like stood up out of my seat when he said Shawn Michaels. Like, and you know, like, again, like, this isn't going to be a whole tirade on Shawn or anything like that, but like, I love Shawn, and that's why like, if you were to ask me like who's my like favorite all-time wrestler, right, like, that's why I struggle, because if you're talking like favorite and most probably impactful to me personally, it would be like a Jeff Hardy answer, right, for numerous reasons. But for me personally, if you're looking at like the best well-rounded wrestler, and when you think of the charisma, the showboating, the promo, the in-ring work, the longevity, the everything, like, just the character change. I mean, of course, like he's not up there in terms of reinventions like a Chris Jericho, and I think Chris Jericho has just outdone himself with that. Like he's just set a whole new bar in that respect. But if you look at Shawn Michaels' career, the evolution of Shawn is pretty fascinating to see as well. And again, once he was reborn and found God and all that, it's pretty much the same going forward, and nowhere near obviously as edgy as like your DX Shawn, obviously. So, because at that point you're a different person, but whatever. But the point is, to me, Shawn is the I don't want to say the logical, because it's at the end of the day it's an opinion, but he's just like the easiest and the most. I'm just gonna say the most logical answer if you were to write down what you need to be a top guy in wrestling, in the world of wrestling. You need key factors, and to me, Shawn had it. Shawn could make you love him, make you hate him, could carry almost anyone to a quality match. And if you want to go off of stars, at least a 3-star match. Like, if you got anything less, like, then something's seriously wrong. And even, I was going to say, even injured, the dude is just insane what he can do in the ring. And to think of what he did, for instance, for Steve Austin at WrestleMania 14 with the back injury that he had and everything like that, obviously Shawn wasn't perfect, and Shawn, on his A&E documentary that they had released, or whatever it was, he said it himself, like, Shawn wrote a book about his life. He hasn't shied away from shit that he's done and the drug use and everything like that, but people fuck up, and people make mistakes, and people live life, you know what I mean? And none of us are perfect, so the fact that he went through all that shit and is giving back to the business now, like, again, I could go on and on about Shawn as well, but I just love that was Taker's answer, and I think that it shows a lot, just his 4, and again, it was Andre the Giant, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and Shawn Michaels, so it wasn't your Ric Flair, your Hulk Hogan, your Ultimate Warrior, your Macho Man. It wasn't your basic. And again, like, you can make obvious arguments for all of them, right? But it was none of them. It was 2 obvious ones, I would say, and then maybe kind of obvious, but not so obvious one in Andre, and then what should be an obvious one, in my opinion, in Shawn Michaels, that isn't for whatever reason. So I just think it was really cool. And again, check that video out if you haven't, but. Again, guys, can't wait for AEW coming up tomorrow night on Wednesday. And then I'm kind of curious to see how next week's show is going to look, just for my nerdy self, just to see how the layout's going to be with the comparison to the fans and attendance and everything like that. But, guys, at the end of the day, none of that shit matters. Wrestling is at an all-time high. Well, maybe not all-time high, but I would say, at least in regards to excitement, an all-time high that we have had at least in 20 years. So take that for what you will, just my opinion, but let me know what you guys think, either at the Kickass Podcast _ on Twitter or at ASHMANNS. And I hope you guys have an awesome week. I'll talk to you guys later.